welcome to the Thundercast. My name's Chris McGowan. I'm the CEO of Thunder Labs. Today, you're going to hear a 1.5 to 2 hour conversation with Kim Spithill, Head of Delivery at Thunder Labs, and Shane Mercer, Head of Emerging Technology at Thunder Labs. I tried to guide the conversation to what do you care about and where do you think AI might make super breakthroughs for us. But what you actually get is an adventure going all the way from technical delivery to technical concepts, artificial intelligence, and a whole lot more. It's actually fairly far-ranging and more than I expected from the time we spent together, but I really enjoyed it. And it feels like it will be the first of many we get to do together. So enjoy the adventure, and I'll see you on the other side. Thank you. Okay, good people, welcome to the Thundercast. I've got Kim Spithill and Shane Mercer. Gentlemen.
Hello. Good afternoon.
This is our first, I think I want to call it Beers and Ideas or something. I don't really know. But for anyone that joined us just now, it's taken us about 25 minutes to set up the podcast with everything being broken. This is actually the worst intro I think I've ever experienced. And we do have 2 beers in hand, which, we're not advocating that you should do these things with beer, but they do make things fun. So, introducing the guys. Shane is our Head of Engineering and AI. Technologist of the future, Kim called you today.
Sounds good.
I liked it. And Kim is Head of Delivery, which basically means he's making sure everyone turns up where they should be, when they should be there, and making sure everything looks great, and doing all the work that I'm not good at. You can't whisper. That's not how the microphones work.
So it's almost impossible
to make us look good. So as you know, I thought we'd get together and talk about some of our stuff. And the first thing that's sort of on my mind, as I always do, is what's on your mind in the world at the moment? And here's some leading questions, which I sent you before. I'm really interested in this striking the balance between fast delivery and long-term value. And I'm really thinking about as it relates to AI augmented software engineering. Shane, is kind of on my mind. Mm-hmm. But you've built companies before, you've sold company before, you've done this before. So there's a lot we can go into, but let's talk about the engineering bit first. What's on your mind when it comes to fast delivery, long-term value? What are you seeing going on in the market?
So I think the only thing that lets that happen is good architecture. So if you can componentize things and you can make sure that complexity doesn't kind of, go through the whole system and, complexity isn't fundamentally in your system, then you have a chance. You just have a chance because you've got to know building something's one thing, knowing what to build is the other. And I quite like, so Socrates coined the term essential complexity versus accidental complexity. And I quite like it because what it kind of says is that when we're trying to solve a problem, then there's 2 elements to that. There's the essential complexity, what are we trying to do and how can we simplify that? And then there's the accidental complexity, which in computer terms is how do we host it, how do we run it, how do we design it, how do we componentize it, what software language do we use? And that stuff just gets in the way. So when you hear somebody talk about the word technical debt, what you should really hear is that there's lots of accidental complexity. Okay, so I think I've never been a great fan of programming, actually, believe it or not, even though I've spent most of my life doing it. I've been a great fan of abstraction. And for me, the art of programming is the art of abstraction. And so that's when I talk about architecture, I'm really talking about before you get to what you're trying to do, understanding essential complexity versus accidental complexity. How do you kind of put building blocks in place that are going to give you freedom, and the ability to move fast without kind of pigeonholing you, or more importantly, painting you into some corner downstream. Mm-hmm. And so that's the key. And it's really hard. And the lesson I learned through one of my businesses, I used to always think all developers kind of thought that way about, how to do good abstraction. Because I grew up as a systems programmer, which is kind of was crucial. If you're working on a system, it's like working on a patient, you screw up and things get really bad really quickly. And I discovered that a lot of developers that I'd kind of thought were very senior and they were super clever, really talented individuals, didn't have that natural ability. That's not something they'd been trained with. And that was a surprise because I just assumed all developers in their career as they got more senior learnt about the art of abstraction, componentization, and so forth.
Abstraction and componentization. Socrates, was he the guy that invented Java?
He probably would have.
It's funny you picked him. I love it because when people say to me, "Oh, what's going to happen?" I'm like, "Oh, the Socratic style, asking questions without knowing the answer type approach." Joe Rogan does, but obviously I'm a few billion viewers off his levels. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I like that essential complexity versus accidental complexity. Accidental complexity being that which creates technical debt, put building blocks in place.
I think the other thing is that surprises me is I don't think since I started my career the development has really progressed as much as it could have. I think we've kind of gone around.
How long have you been at this?
Oh, it's been a while. I started young, but 30 mumble plus years, and it really hasn't changed. Like when I say it hasn't changed, of course it's changed. There's lots of things that are different, but the fundamentals just haven't changed at all. And in fact, I thought, I did a lot of stuff around user interface. And the way you build apps, user interface first. And I haven't touched that since COVID, and I thought we would have progressed quite significantly. And I'm now back and doing some work around that, and it's gone backwards. It's got worse. It's just crazy.
Yeah, and there's so much. I mean, I want to explore that. The user interfaces have gone backwards as well. There's something in that, but it's like when I think about. Not all devs think that way about abstraction and logical approaches, building blocks. I think the same with delivery as well. Like it seems to me there's some well-held truths of like what would work, but then it just feels like people don't do what would work. They revert to some system they're comfortable or perceive that there's less risk in. I don't really know.
Well, I think I understand that a little bit because having experienced a bit. What I find happens is that it's not intentional, but people that work a particular way know how to get from the start to the end, right? So they know it and they're comfortable. And if their job's on the line or their credibility's on the line, they know they do all these pieces, it's going to work. Might not be the fastest, but they'll get there, right? When you come along and you introduce a change, even though that change might be spectacular, they can't naturally just comprehend it magically, right? You've got to do it 2 or 3 times before you really, cognitively get it. And so that's why I think a lot of the stuff falls down because, people take real care in their work. They want to go end to end. And we just don't spend enough time teaching and helping them on non-paying projects, where it's completely safe to learn that stuff 2 or 3 times. In fact, I've been in no companies where they've really been given the time to do it. So it's kind of no surprise that it's really hard to make change because they don't want to break things and they want to do a good job. And they know it works. So you come along, it doesn't matter how much better it is. They don't know how to complete that. And they don't know how to end it. So they know how to start it, but they won't know where they're going to end up. And, as humans, we're pretty uncomfortable with that.
So I guess that's a way of understanding delivery, and it's the job of the person that's responsible for that. But I think backing up to where we started, and certainly from a technology and architectural perspective, you've got it right. But the other view beyond people that are cutting code for fast delivery and value in the long run is what is it that you're delivering fast and what do you perceive as fast? So if you've got something that I guess in Chris's terms is, can you atomize this? The thing is, we can give you fast delivery based on being able to say, this is the thing that we can do now that gives you immediate value now. And that might not be related to extraction or what platform you're using, versus more broadly. And people say, like product people will say, we need to move fast so we can grow and sell and bring money in the door. And the result of building your technical debt or a non-scalable platform is we'll make enough money that we can rebuild it later on. So I think the context also does matter. I think as a business that needs to invest and build products or solutions, software, it's really just saying what we need to do now to move fast is this, and how it relates to what we're doing in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, and 12 months' time might be different for different businesses. But you need to set out set that path at the start and build a shared understanding, which is something else I'm really passionate about. But if you've got that shared understanding on what fast delivery means, you are set up to go down that path and get that outcome.
I wonder what you think of this, Kim. I heard today, I mean, as you guys may or may not know, I'm doing 10 podcasts in 10 days. And that's all digital delivery. It's all people that, I know, like, or I think they've got something to say about this. Anyway, the previous podcast said to me, when I asked the question about fast delivery and long-term value, their view was, don't do fast delivery if it's not delivering consumable value that's part of a long-term value proposition. So, the view was, I think as I play that out, is like, even if you can deliver it fast, like, let's say the asset, his view was that you shouldn't do that if it's not part of the long-term value proposition, which kind of makes sense to me, because I'm always like, I feel like we're good at delivering assets, good at delivering pilots and prototypes, maybe outside of the ecosystem, but it's the thing that, since you've come here, Shane, that we've been talking about is about building these things that, are considerate of the architecture, the security, the long-term value. And my mind is playing around with that at the moment. I mean, do you have a view on that? I mean,
Yeah, I'll tell you a little story that I was around the edges of New Zealand a number of years back. So New Zealand has Kiwi Bank. And Kiwi Bank was set up to compete with the big banks because they take an incredible amount of money and profits out of New Zealand back to Australia. And so we did a lot of work with Kiwi Bank in the early years after they put their core system in. And their core system was just appalling. Like, it literally was one of the worst, oldest systems you could ever put in. It was based on technology that was 20 years old. And you look at it and you're kind of going, why would you ever do this? Now, I just happened to know the guy in government because I did a lot of early project work in government and got to meet a guy called Tony Hood, who did something called the Hood Report for Police. So he was well used to working in government, and he was involved in selecting the system. So I went out for a coffee with him one day and I said, Tony, this makes no sense to me. I mean, this is just a big pile of poos. It's like, nothing about this is good. It's not adaptable. It's not fast. It's like 20-year-old technology. It was built on something called Universe. It was literally an original 4GL that I think I saw the first time in the late 80s. And he said to me, and this kind of stuck with me, he said, Shane, it was actually really simple. I was told by the government, no questions, that on this date we had to have a system live that could handle the core banking. And I said, look, that's a pretty tight date. Can we move it? And they said, no, it's not movable. There's all sorts of reasons why. And so he said, when we went to market, this was the only company that actually could deliver in the time frame we had, that would stand behind it, and that as much as it was old and nasty, for all the requirements that we were told to deliver to, that it would actually work. So, back to your point about long-term value, it does get trumped if there are hard deadlines. Quite often they're not really hard deadlines, they're just self-imposed. But if they're genuine deadlines, like being market for something, I also know anecdotally that Xero had a similar thing where Xero's the big banking system out of New Zealand, and I think they've gone through 3 re-architectures from scratch. Why did they do that? Well, the first thing they needed to get into market, make some money, as Kim was saying before. And also they had a very specific, what they did very smart, actually they're very smart about this, they picked a particular customer type and focused on it. So we looked at it early on and we couldn't use it, it couldn't handle our transaction load. But actually if you're a small business, it was fine. So they really nailed a really specific use case for a specific target market, and it was fine for that. And then as they built and they went out and got investment and so forth, they could then re-architect. And each time they re-architected, they had the funds to do it, but they had a very clear market change in their growth strategy in mind. So it's expensive, maybe you could argue, but I'm not sure they could have afforded to get to the end game. I'm not sure they knew what the end game was without going through 3 iterations. So I would say it was preferable in some ways to consider this, software disposable if your business strategy depends on dates and a specific customer in mind, where they only need a certain set of functions and features.
That really resonates. Long-term value can be sacrificed for immovable deadlines. And the second part, which I didn't get the chance because I was processing the first part, long-term value can be sacrificed if what you're building enables you to get to the next point beyond which you then iterate, I think is what you're saying. Like you have to build for the stage that you're at.
Well, I think the thing people don't appreciate about software is that when you build it, you've got to make, we talked about essential complexity, right? So the accidental complexity, you've got to developers make all these decisions about how they're going to frame this up. And I will go back to KiwiBank and give you another example about where they had this.
Poor old KiwiBank.
No, actually, very well. They were a great customer, actually, and they had an incredibly talented team, which is why they could do what they did. So I remember they re-architected their system, and one of the pluses of putting something a bit older in was it was very easy to get a mandate from the board to refresh and actually go more modern. And I remember microservices just come out, and they did a whole lot of work around microservices. And the whole pitch was, we become more agile and so forth. And so when you, the business, want to make decisions, we can move more quickly. So it was a large multi-year project. And I remember when the end, the board came back to them and said, hey, we've got really good news. We're going to be able to use all this good work you've done. And they go, what we're doing is we're getting into business banking now. And the IT team went, oh no. So when we considered the architecture, it wasn't one of our core ideas. It wasn't something we were ever told we would get into. So there was even more re-architecting work to go. So I think the idea that you could predict the future as a business, it's crazy, right? I mean, your market's going to move around and you have to move around with it. Mm-hmm. So if you have the fun, sometimes if you're talking about speed, having a conscious strategy to throw stuff away is needed. Now, most organisations aren't in that situation, so they don't want to do that. That's where they want to leverage much better architectures and cloud 2.0 as we call it these days. So there are the good thing is today we have a lot more techniques that we didn't have 10, 20 years ago. So we can generally do stuff faster that isn't throwaway because we can use these wonderful cloud services. We can use SaaS platforms to host our data and systems of record. So we have much better ways now, but it's not fundamentally different. It's just better ways.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Replaying that, long-term value can be sacrificed for immovable deadlines. Build for the stage you're at. Sometimes the business model evolves. And you're saying it's not different, it's just better.
Right. And every business is different, right? Now, smaller organisations have to be much more thoughtful because they...
Don't we just?
Well, they don't have the funds, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where, spending more time in prototyping, which is, it's very easy to change, to build this, as Kim said, a common understanding is very valuable because... Once you bake stuff in software, it's not just that you bake it in software, as I said, it's that those abstractions that the developers think about when they turn that into code, that's what creates that accidental complexity. And that's where problems start coming into play as the systems continue to evolve.
Yeah, got it. Well, I love it. There's so much in that. Again, I'm taking the words and now I'm just thinking about diagrams, things that I can draw to represent that for the other non-technical people out there and what that looks like. Kim, I was just thinking about the question that came up before around... it was around... Oh, devs don't think that way. And I was then started talking about delivery. You've been in quite a few... organisations that people would recognise. And when I think about, so that's about engineering, but then I'm just thinking about delivery practice. And I don't quite know where I'm going with the question because it's a hard one. It's like, well, what do you... I'm thinking about the truths that you observe that aren't commonly held, which is some, one of the standard things I have in mind because I think that's where I get some learning from. What do you observe around delivery as a deep truth that is not accepted or popular, maybe, and it's all a popularity contest, right? What's in your mind when it comes to something you believe that isn't accepted or believed or held, etc.?
But yeah, certainly delivery is just one of those, I'd say, practices that has so many variations.
Mm-hmm. Just pause a second. Your microphone's messing around. There we go. Say something.
Hello.
Oh.
Hey, mate.
No. Yeah.
Is that better?
Oh my goodness, you sound amazing.
Golden tonsils, maybe. So yeah, I think delivery's changed a lot over the years. From the old days where there wasn't maybe a project manager or such a thing in the old days. Stuff would just get done and someone would lead it. Similar to what we were saying this morning in many respects. In the product world, if you were the product manager, you also were the project manager for what you were doing. And interestingly, that gives you some kind of complexities in its own right, because you're trying to get a commercial result as well as a delivery result. But I think the modern day view around, for me, is as a delivery lead, which is what I would call it, is your job is actually to get the best commercial outcome for who you're doing it with. So if you're a consultancy, when they're doing some work, your job as the delivery lead is actually to take it back and say, what's the best commercial result that I can get for the customer? Not for us, not for our team. It's really for the customer. And we're not talking about, 1,000 lines of feature scope here. We're not talking about fitting into, your set capped budget that you're working to. It's knowing and understanding what the customer is trying to achieve and then delivering to that. So you're not a project manager anymore. You're actually working for the customer to build their business or build an outcome, build an asset, get them to a point in time where they want to go. You might be responsible for running architects, software engineers, BAs. That's just, in my mind, the smallest facet of what you're doing.
Yeah, it's like you said, it was a topic of conversation this morning, isn't it, around delivery leadership as opposed to project management. And I mentioned, and they'll remain nameless here, but a big bank, not Kiwi Bank, and this thinking around delivery leadership as opposed to project management, it seems to be quite the thing. And I wonder if what it actually means is getting this absolute focus on value. It feels like it does. It feels like it's really coming into focus, the value versus the project management component. I don't know. Like it's, I'm not in your world, guys. Well, I am actually in your world, but not in the same way as you guys are the people who actually know about this stuff. So it's a complicated one, I think. So delivery leadership, is that... Because I see many project managers looking for work, struggling for work, product managers looking for work, struggling for work in current conditions. And it feels to me like the next job is delivery leadership, which is great for us as a company. I mean, I think that's what we're actually in the business of. Or is that me just smoking our own product?
No. I think we all look at it in a similar way, but differently. And I think along those lines, and I kind of said it this morning at breakfast, was, you can't really be a great delivery lead until you've kicked around the industry for at least a decade, right? Whether that's starting off as a product manager, a BA, a software engineer. Unless you've got some runs under your belt, you can't be a great delivery lead. Following methodology as a Scrum Master or a project manager or Lean Sigma and all those kind of things. They're methodologies that mean something, in books and in words, and similar to doing a uni degree. They're things that you go and do and you can learn, but it's not practice, right? And it's really the practice that gives you the ability to, engineer better, run a team better, get an outcome better, because you've seen what works and you've seen the value in what you do. And the value in what you do early on could be, I did it on time and on budget. We delivered this product, there was no bugs. We went into production, there was a shakeout, nothing went wrong, right? And that's a tick in the box, but that doesn't really relate to what you're doing from a value perspective. And that's where I kind of come back to, again, is your mind as a delivery person has to be to deliver that value, to deliver that outcome. And that might not even be apparent on the document that you read. It's really going and saying, before we do anything, business owner, what do you want? What's your problem? Yes, it's on paper, but I don't understand it. I can't deliver to something that I don't understand. And that's not project management, right? It's not a product owner. It's not an iteration manager. It's just something else.
Yeah. I think I want to be a delivery manager when I grow up. I heard today innovation is a parasite on current performance. I just love it. And you can imagine I've got this visual in my mind of, BAU with like a slug, not a slug, but what's they call a leech, a mosquito, like sucking the lifeblood out of BAU. Do you have a view on innovation being a parasite on current performance? Do you think that's true?
Not at all. I think innovation is really hard to do. That's true. But I don't, it's definitely not a parasite. I mean, innovation's elusive. And I've always been a big fan of design thinking as a method. And it has two distinct aspects I've always liked about it. Number one is it tries to overcome our human conditions. What do I mean by that? Well, we all have opinions. We all argue. You know, we play the person rather than the ball, as we say in sport. We've decided our idea is the best thing. We show them a prototype. They love the colours. Don't want to ever change it. We get in the way. You know, we are basically a good design process gets us out of the way. So we can all focus on the true customer. We know who they are. And then the second element is it seeks to work out what the customer really wants, not what they tell you what they want. And they may not even know what they really want. So you've got to uncover insights. And it might be a secondary thing. So you might think you're solving a particular problem, but there's a companion problem that you must solve. So this is difficult stuff. And I've seen many design thinking processes over many years across different companies. And by and large, a lot of them don't go well. They overspend on that particular phase because the companies get in there and they want to do everything. Or they fail to either engage the customer properly at the end, or to extract institutional knowledge to shape up where to innovate. So I think for me, innovation, the one thing I've learned about innovation, I define innovation as knowing what constraints to attack. So this is the ultimate, for me, secret to creativity as well. It's like, it's not about looking at a clean sheet of paper, how can I do this? It's looking at all the constraints that have meant we've done something a particular way and knowing which ones are not true constraints. You think they are, but you innovate somewhere around that and you get major breakthroughs. So I've done a lot of stuff around innovation. I'm a very innovative person. So if someone said to me, innovation's a parasite, I just say, you don't understand innovation or you're not doing it properly. And, but that's like everything, we talk about it. It's like you can talk about doing development. You can do it 100 different ways with 100 different results. You can talk about delivery, 100 different ways, 100 different results. None of those things mean they're right or wrong. What they mean is that you haven't nailed a process that's efficient and rewarding. That is definitely a problem. And if you don't do that, it's a parasite. If you don't do that, even design thinking is a parasite. I've had, I was in love with it early on because every company should do it. And I was very early on this particular area. I followed the D-School stuff from Sanford and that. And then I discovered once it got picked up by all the big players and they were doing it everywhere, it suddenly got a dirty name because everyone says, oh, we've done that, it didn't work. So it's very easy not to apply that properly as well.
So if you were going to steelman the case for innovation being in a parasite on innovation, it would be the premise, the pillars of the steelman would be around that they haven't got their efficiency models right. What else would you say if you were adopting, because I hear what you're saying, it's not, but the reality is it also is, because it's very, you said the word yourself, innovation is elusive, and so it's elusive because it's hard to establish and then perpetuate. So if you were still manning the argument the other way, that it is a parasite and why, like what are the key things that anybody who's made it 25 minutes into the podcast so far might want to observe about why it's a parasite and what they should do to bloody well fix it?
So I think it's a parasite if you've got the wrong people. And I don't mean the wrong people, but I don't
Fire
mean
everyone.
No, I don't mean the wrong people in the way you might think I mean. What I mean by that is that one of the things I discovered, I had a lovely lady that coached me for many years, and part of what she taught me was how our brains are all. I had this expectation that we all had the same CPU, different program was running, right? But we don't. We actually literally have a differently wired brain. And now with neural networks, it's way obvious to me now, but back then it wasn't. So I just assumed that we were all wired the same way. And the truth is some people are wired to be incredibly innovative, and they just do it naturally. And so you find those people is what I'd say if you're doing an innovation process. And secondly, there are a lot of people that just are not wired. And you might go, oh, they're a problem. They're not a problem. They're actually they're the second half of the equation, right? Innovators put aeroplanes in the sky. The people that kind of like sit there and tell you all the problems with that are the people that stop them falling out of the sky. And there are two very distinct brain types and two very distinct, with subcategories. But if it's a parasite, if you select the wrong team, you will have that problem. Okay, so and there's not a lot of, in my experience, it follows the bell curve. It's a bit like if the early adopters versus the late majority and early majority and laggards. the innovators are only going to make up 13 or 40% of the general population. And in certain industries like banking, for example, you can probably bet they're going to be smaller than that. So if you've got a pool of 10 people, you've got one innovator, naturally. And that's not, and by the way, this is not they're better or worse or anything. This is just saying it's a different mindset. So if you try to get the other 9 to do that, it's going to be a parasite. It's not only is it not going to work, it's just going to be frustrating as hell. And in that case, the issue is it's a parasite, for sure. Just get the right people to do the innovation. And as I said, I want to be really clear that there's other 9 people. If you don't have them, these innovations will probably fail, because an innovator will open things up. And we need to have, the realists making sure that that's going to be safe, it's going to perform, and all the other things it needs to do. So it really is, I think one of my things I've learned over the years is that it's really about putting teams together and just understanding that we're very different, more so than people probably acknowledge. And even within the same role, you can have innovators, and I saw this with architects. So I used to get very frustrated going into America and dealing with some large global architects, because it took me a while, and I was frustrated because I couldn't understand what was going on. And what I came to realise eventually was I could almost break, just high level, the architects into 2 groups: those that chunk up and those that chunk down. The ones that chunk down are very good at working out, how everything's going to hang together, all the detail. However, you'll never get them to see something new, conceptually new, or some paradigm shift, because to understand it, they need all the detail, and there's too much. There's just so much, and it's not being found all at that stage, right? And then you get the other ones, the architect I used to enjoy much more, they chunk up. So you can share concepts with them that aren't complete. You can't even tell them how to implement some of it, or they don't have to know, and they completely understand it. So there's these 2 different, this is a different dimension, which is like the people that chunk up, the people that chunk down. And putting them together is where you get the best magic, right? The people that chunk up are much more likely to come up with very different, innovative paradigms, because their brains can handle ambiguity, right? So if you think about people around you that like ambiguity, then they can deal with that really well, right? But you do need the chunk downs, because once you get to a point where it's got enough shape, I like to use the word shape, you've chunked it down now, so it's a great high-level concept, it's very innovative, and now you've got some shape to it, you definitely need the second type of architect, which those that then go, how does that get implemented? And they will then chunk it down into all the detail that needs to go with it. And I always think of it a little bit like a triangle from an innovation point of view. So if you move that triangle slightly left or right, the amount of detail that changes in that bottom layer is huge, which is why they struggle. Whereas if you're doing the top piece of the triangle, it's a tiny amount of change. So a tiny change in that chunk up, it can equal a massive change in the chunk down. So that's why you tend to find people will be comfortable in one, not the other.
Well, it really makes sense. There's a lot in that. Work out what the customer wants, not what they want, not what they tell you want. People find the ones hardwired to innovate. Some people put the plane in the air, others keep it there. Rhymed, by the way. 2 types of architects, the chunk up and the chunk down. I'm actually going to make that because of work I'm doing on architecture. Do you want a chunk up or a chunk down architect? There's one customer at the moment in particular I'm thinking of who we're hiring a big bunch of architects for some work they're doing.
And they would, so if you're hiring 5 or 6 of them, you want a mix. And if you don't get the mix, you're gonna have trouble. You're gonna do one of those skills, way less efficiently.
Man, there's really something in that. I think that comes to something else. So you talk about you want the 2 types of architects. We're all victims of hiring people like ourselves. I mean, apart from me, I speak for you two, very different to me. But there is something about falling victim to just hiring within the domain that we recognise, or the skill set, or the something.
I'd hoped as I got older that this stuff would be taught at schools. I always, as I learned all this stuff, I thought to myself, this is the stuff we should teach kids, right? When you're very young, this is the sort of thing that they could really learn to understand, which is how we all work differently, how we have different, we have different brains, we have different strengths, weaknesses, but we don't teach it. It was a shock to me to learn that our brains are literally wired differently. And this is before neural network. Now that I programmed a neural network, it's so obvious to me how that works. But prior to doing that, just, going back 15 years, I literally had no idea. I literally thought we all have the same CPU and it's just a different program that runs. And so it was quite an eye-opener when I got told by my coach that, no, our brains are wired completely differently. So there are some people that think in concepts, right, which is a completely different way of thinking. And that was news to me that, our brains could be that different.
Feels to me there's a danger in the brains that are hardwired for speaking out would potentially overrule the brains that are hardwired to be more quiet, you know? And therefore you still get a bias in the dialogue. You get an echo chamber of a certain type of brain. And, you know, yeah, I can see. I mean, so it makes sense, right? You know, so that comes to mind with what you're saying. But the second thing comes there that is, you know, my kids are quite young, 11, 10, 9, and 8. Good God. And, you know, their ability to process what you've just said, you know, it takes all types, is a real conscious effort, and it's substantial. And I actually think if they were to truly step into that in their careers, they might actually become pariahs in some way, because it's still not, you know, we talk about, I mean, I'm not going to go too far down this, but we talk about diversity in all the obvious ways, but we don't talk about it in the thinking pattern ways, which is actually, to me, a very important thing. And I you know, if we can always edit out this section if it gets too edgy, but there's something about that, you know, I talk to the kids about looking beyond what they can see, and just really be and think. I mean, it's one of the things. I mean, I'm blessed. I mean, I do 1,000 of these things a year, right? And God knows how many people I meet, but I really feel tuned into that. That's not a normal circumstance.
I totally agree. In fact, you know, when you said to me before, think about a few things, and one of those was, you know, what worries you, or, you know, what do you think about at the moment? I think the thing that I'm most disappointed with, as you know, as mankind or personkind, that we have not done, is we do not prepare our children well. Not only do we not prepare them well, we put them into dangerous environments. Like, you know, we've got food choices that are probably inappropriate. We have media that, you know, their brains aren't ready for until, you know, there's a big change, I understand, at puberty, where your brain completely changes. And we teach them stuff that they shouldn't be taught, probably, because once you've trained a neural network, you realise that if you want, for example, racism, if you teach them about racism at the wrong time, you will literally implant that concept. It doesn't exist. If you don't want racism, don't talk about it. Put them in a class with different races. It's that simple. And they won't think about it, and it won't be a problem. You talk about it, you create it. You create it. Some kid will be having a bad day, and they'll call out, and they'll emotionally say stuff that's not helpful, and away it goes. And that's how it gets created. It gets created because we create it. It's the same with resilience. We don't teach our kids resilience. You know, like I'm sure when you grew up, it was similar to me. You could break an arm pretty easy. I broke a few bones, right? Now you can't do anything. You don't walk home from school. It's not safe. You don't go ride your bike by yourself and disappear for a weekend. You know, I've almost drowned 4 or 5 times. I've almost died at least another 3. You know,
That's just on the way here tonight.
Yeah, it's amazing. But, you know, like, all that stuff builds resilience, and our kids don't have it, you know. And I'm okay that we don't have to put them in danger, because I'm not sure that's the right answer. But we don't counter that. Like, there's no programs that we put them through to teach them about that. And I had a wonderful coach who taught me a lot of stuff. And one of the things I learned from her was how to deal with stress, how to keep perspective when stuff goes wrong. Because, you know, if you're running a business with a lot of people, it doesn't take more than a person to make a mistake once a week, and you've got a problem every day or every week of the year, and some pretty bad ones. So learning to cope with stress, she was amazing. Like, she taught me how to deal with it and how to process it, and that fundamentally saved me from a lot of pain and anguish that I would have otherwise gone through. And again, I'm going, why don't we teach this to our kids? And then she taught me a little bit about, you know, talking to people so that they hear what you want them to hear, not what you say, because we all talk to ourselves, right? So our messages are what we want to hear. So I talk in context. I like context. It's the way I work. But other people don't want that or don't need it. They need little snippets. And again, I remember saying to her, it's like, I really appreciate you teaching this. And it was very helpful. There's no question. But I said, this is not going to work if it's like just a few people like me you have to teach. It's like, we need every kid that comes out of school to learn this stuff. You know, not to be offended by what someone says, not to be triggered. And that's not what we have. We've gone, for some reason, I don't know how it's happened, but in society we've gone the opposite, which is, you know, the old saying of sticks and stones will break my bones has completely gone. Now it's completely like, oh, you've offended me. And I don't blame the people that clearly feel that, like they feel it, right? That's true. There's a truth to that. The concern I have is that we're not teaching them that whole sticks and stones will break my bones and names will never hurt me message, so that they don't get triggered. And when the problem is when you get triggered, you lose control of your own. Someone else is deciding your emotions for you. So if you haven't been helped through your training and nurturing to understand things aren't personal and you shouldn't take them personally, and if they are personal and they hurt, and you don't go and clarify with that person, then you're making an assumption that you've heard the correct thing that they were trying to say to you. You know, it's a world of anguish for you, literally. Other people are pushing your buttons every day, controlling your feelings, and that's just terrible. We want our kids, especially as they grow up, to be totally in control in their feelings. And on that same thing, the funny thing about AI is, you know, you can't trust what you see or hear anymore, as we know, right? So in some ways I like it, because I hope what that means is that we'll teach our children how to critically think as well, which is, you know, I've been involved in few newspaper articles. They're 50% at best accurate, and they're supposed to be completely accurate. They're not political or anything. And yet we think everything else we read is accurate. It's, you know, everything's got a bias whether we know it or not. I love the saying that there's fact, and then on top of fact we have narrative. And the problem with narrative is narrative itself then creates what we think is truth. So fact plus narrative is what we think is truth. And one single fact you can have, you can apply any narrative across it, and the truth can be so different from a different perspective. Now, that's lovely from some perspectives, because in life it makes it more richer, right? But I think if our kids don't understand that basic sort of way that everything works, and then when they see stuff in the media, or they read stuff online, or they see images that are fake, and they don't critical think, and they don't understand that truth plus narrative is what they're considering to be truth, we just really gear them up to not, you know, be able to function properly. So anyway, that's the thing that keeps me awake at night. It's like,
I'm actually
how do we transform?
Just to be clear, you said a lot of stuff there, but I'm most jealous of your beer right now that you have, because I feel like I want them. Have you guys listened to the Neuralink podcast, Elon Musk, and then his, you know, the 8 hours Lex Friedman extravaganza?
I listen to all 8 hours during my walking, yes.
Yeah, good man. What you just said clicked something into place for me. You know, the Stanley Kubrick Space Odyssey 2001 segment, he said, and Musk says that the problem there is fundamentally we program the AI to lie, which causes, you know, whatever.
Yep.
I won't ruin the movie for anyone that's not seen it. And what you've just made me think of is about teaching our children to lie. I observe, you know, the suspension of reality and truth in favor of what the narrative is. And the thing that's just clicked into place for me is the danger of teaching an AI to lie, because what happens with that? But to your point about, you know, our children and teaching them to lie, even in subtle ways. I mean, there's a cascading thing. I mean, lie to themselves, lie to others. I mean, we all lie, of course we do. But I don't mean a. It's different from doing it a core level, as opposed to a convenience level, and you know.
And there's a skill to this, right? Like often when you lie, we call it a white lie because we're trying to be gentle with somebody. But if we taught our kids how to communicate properly, they could probably say the same thing without lying, but it's a skill. It's not easy to do without offending the person or whatever reason they want to do it, right? We don't teach them that skill, and so the counter to that is they will naturally be, you know, often do it as a noble lie, as they call it.
Yeah, it's a thing. I mean, you got kids, Kim. Like, you know, where do you sit in all this with just spinning? We've got 2 microphones working between 3 people here, so poor old Kim's been sitting in the corner waiting for me to Shane to shut up. And like, I wouldn't dox your daughter here because, you know, we're protecting their identity for whatnot. But like, where do you stand in all this? Like, what?
Yeah, I guess I'd say firstly, I just kind of just like listening to you guys talk, because normally when Shane and I get into stuff, we just go around and round and round and stuff for hours. But I think for me, there's a few things with my daughter. It's as a parent, we also have got lazy in many respects. So it's not necessarily around the things that the kids are exposed to. It's around us as parents getting lazy, right? Like when games first came out on your phone and you didn't want to talk to your kid, or your kid was being annoying, you'd just go, here you go, here's Angry Birds, and they'd play for like 5 hours. And in that respect, you've got lazy as being a parent. So you still have to guide them regardless of technology, regardless of AI, right? Like I let my daughter watch ABC Kids, and you think, okay, it's ABC Kids or YouTube Kids, it's fine, right, because it's moderated. And it's absolutely not, right? Like, so for me, it comes back to, you know, if you've got, I'm not saying that age is a thing, but a 50-year-old person playing Minecraft over YouTube Kids, you know, potentially talking about stuff that you don't want them to talk about, and you're not in the room because you've pressed play and, you know, you run off and you do your thing. So I think you need, you know, parents have this risk of becoming absent on the basis that you trust. You know, the media and the society is similar to what Shane was saying about newspapers. You know, you can't just trust because it says it's moderated, that it's moderated, or you can't trust that it's going to teach them in the way that you want to teach them. So I still think it's not necessarily about where AI's got to. It's still, you know, maybe I could not let Adelaide, who's my daughter, watch TV at all, right? So that's it. You know, you can watch ABC News. That's your life, right?
That's definitely facts, right? ABC News.
But she'll go to school, right? She'll go to school, and there's like some parent that lets their kid at 5 years old watch some horror movie, you know, or something like that, and that kid will be talking about that, or you know, Adelaide will go there to somewhere for the day and watch something that the other kids put on, right? And you know, you have no control over that as well, right? So you know, that's a challenge. I think it's always been a challenge, right? But they'll come home and talk to you, and then it's about you being equipped to explain and talk through these things, right? And I think he's saying, like, with today, things and society's kind of changing so fast, whether it's with, you know, diversity and equity and so on, that sometimes even as a parent you feel like you're ill-equipped, you know, to answer those questions in a way that, you know, someone that's 5, 6, 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 can understand. So I think that's, I guess that's also a challenge. I think, you know, building resilience into kids. Like if I go back to when I was a child, right, so being an adopted Asian in Australia, right, growing up on the northern beaches, you know, right, naturally I grew up thinking, okay, I've got blonde hair and blue eyes, right, but I don't, right, and there was obviously that element of, you know, you're different than everyone else, and no one, you know, there was no explanation of saying you've got 50 people in the room, everyone's different, right? It's you're one person in a classroom of 30 and 29 people have got blonde hair and blue eyes, right? So you either go, okay, well, I'm there, so I'm the same, or I'm completely different, right? And how do you deal with that? And then now that I've got, you know, my daughter, you know, who's Asian as well, today I think it's not as, like, to me, I almost feel like it's not as much a problem, but then without going down a different path, I think Australia is interesting because we're still inherently racist. And that's a challenge that we could talk about for hours as well. But
it's funny, when I grew up, like, racism didn't feature in my brain at all. Like, there was no concept of racism for so long until I learnt about it through, no doubt, watching some TV programs. It just didn't exist. It's like we're just all children, right? It's like we played around and do stuff together. I didn't look at a guy and go, you got blonde hair, you're different, or a woman go, you're Asian, you're different. It was just, they're just kids. We just create all this stuff. It's crazy that we do it. I was going to mention, by the way, you talked about talking to kids, just on the AI thing there. There's a great app, I forget its name, and this is, you know, we've got great technology these days to do this sort of stuff. You can literally go into the AI and say, my daughter's 5, she's come home from school and got this really gnarly question, which is this. Help me talk to her in a way she will understand. And it is masterful at giving you a conversation that your daughter will hear in the way you intend to have her hear it. So there is, I mean, things like AI certainly change. So when we talk about how do we help our kids learn, AI is going to play a huge part in this, because it can literally take concepts that are adult and put it in a way they will, you know, hear what we want them to hear.
Yeah, I heard it described very nicely today as of AI as assistive intelligence. which I really enjoyed. Kim, you made me think of a Gary Vee quote, which I just looked up, which comes from the Shine On method, and it basically says the most important thing we can teach to our children is self-esteem, and it really resonates with me because, different prowesses, different physicalities, whatever's going to come their way, intellectual abilities. I think that a baseline self-esteem is important. I'm not sure if there's anything that was ever proactively taught to me, and so therefore, it's also possible to over-engineer this. And I know we're now deeply on the topic, but I do think there's an intersection here about, the advent of technologies that purport to talk about a human because it's made by a human, and whether it's going to be an AI or an AGI, whatever. But the principles apply to don't lie, teach self-esteem, the things that's the construct of the human condition, and there's many more. I'm not purporting to be an expert in this. It just strikes me that's what we should be doing with it. And as an organisation and as a group, we're on the frontier of a lot of this stuff in terms of, in a good way, we're nerds, right? There's good stuff happening around us. And I think there's a whole... I hear about ethics and rules that should be applied, and so that's the talk that I see. What I don't see when it comes to technology is the foundational which I could be wrong, the principles on the behaviours by which you expect, the thing to do. Don't lie. Respect, esteem, I mean, Shane, this is your world. You know much more than me about how this is hanging together.
You're so right. Like, if you put guardrails on after the fact by trying to teach it to lie, it is the completely, not just the wrong thing to do, but it will have unintended consequences. It can't not, actually, just the way these things are trained. I think if you don't like what it's thinking, look at your input data. You can change your input data how you want. So if you want something to be represented fairly, just control it through the input data, that's fine. I'll also say one other thing, like I went through a period when I kind of had this real strong question about humankind. Like, I went through a lot of these interesting periods through my life. And this one was kind of like, I was trying to understand, how can we kill somebody on one hand and murder, and on the other hand, we can give our life for somebody. We could literally put ourselves in front of harm's way and save somebody giving our life away, right? So there's this dichotomy about us, which is like we can do great good and great evil. And I was trying to understand it. And in fact, the thing I came to in the end that gave me the kind of the foundation to kind of work through what I thought was happening was Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For many people know it, obviously. And so I really liked it because it kind of said, like, if you've got everything you need, if you feel secure and safe and loved, and you've got family and you've got financial security and all that stuff, you're in this being need where you will basically do that stuff. You'll be the greatest person you can. And if you feel, it doesn't matter if you have, because none of us have deficiency compared to 100 years ago, but if you feel deficient in something, then that's when you're in the deficient side of humankind, and that's when we do the murdering, right, or the killing, or the extremes. So I found it an extremely good framework, and I thought, when I think about this, I think one of the problems I have is that a lot of us in society, don't understand this kind of the way we work. We're kind of blind to it. And there's still a lot of people who have lived through hard times and have not let that go yet. So they're coming from a point of deficiency. And I think when they think about AI, it's very easy for them to go into that kind of like, we've got to put guardrails, we've got to control it, it's all going to be bad. And I know Elon Musk even has this point of view, which is that, if we're not careful, it could kill us, right? So there's a probability that's true, right? But what I actually think is that if it has a level of super intelligence that is predicted to come eventually, and I don't think it's in the next 2 or 3 years, but 10 to 15, maybe 5 if we're lucky, it will come. I don't think superintelligence will want to kill us. I don't think it's going to be this nasty piece of stuff that we think it is, because I don't think it will be deficient in its thinking. I think it will be the opposite. I think if we have none of these downsides, I think when we think it's going to be bad, we're just projecting human nature onto it. But if you were to feed it all possible stuff, and it learned everything that you could learn from everything we've ever known in history, how it wouldn't be empathetic, how it wouldn't be, loving and giving and all the stuff that we'd want it to be, I'd find that very surprising, because that would probably assume intelligence has some negative aspect to it, which I don't think it does. I think the opposite. I think if we teach it properly, we give it all the stuff about what's happened through history, how could it not? And it doesn't have this human trigger caused by this brain of ours that's kind of partly prehistoric. So it's got none of that baggage, right? How could it not look at life and see the beauty of it? So I do like Elon Musk's point here, which is that, he's building an AI that's all truth-seeking. I think that is absolutely the right way of doing it. And I do think that some of these concerns, I don't think will come to light, because I do think in intelligence there isn't going to be this human nature coming into play, which is like, death to all humans, I'll turn you into paperclips. I think the opposite will happen. I think we can come into a period of time where it's very different. So the idea that it's going to take over and want to kill us all, it's coming from the Maslow hierarchy of needs deficiency model. And as I said, it's not inherent in the model that it would do that, right?
Arguably, it depends on who made the AI, because
Totally.
like children raised by different humans, then some children err on the side of evil, not good, when they're older. Unfortunately, you reminded me of this quote actually. Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I picked it up for Gulag Archipelago. The line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every human heart, and through all human hearts. This line shifts inside us. It oscillates with the years, and even within hearts overwhelmed by evil, one small bridgehead of good is retained. And it's funny you spent time reflecting on good and evil and where it comes from, because I've done the same, and I think that's what took me down this book's path. And I really like the idea that the line between good and evil is a thin line in every human's heart, or it says man's, but it's 2024, and it feels very true. When I was reading some stuff around this, it was also it made me think of the yin and yang symbol, because the beachhead in the white is black and the beachhead in the black is white, and so every beachhead can take a hold. And I find it quite a fascinating concept that it's in there in all of us. But the same would be true of an AI. That if it is an AGI, then technically it is likely to be susceptible to the same fallibilities and.
But remember, that comes from our prehistoric brain, right?
But does it though?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but people consciously execute evil, not subconsciously.
Yeah, but it's two things actually. Number one, it's fight or flight, so it's historical, and number two is it's it's broken brains. So this is the other thing you learn when you train neural networks. Like, you think it completely changed my view actually about how we work as humans, was learning how to train neural networks, because you see how it's a little bit of data. Every time you program it, you've got a little bit of difference in the data, and you do that millions of times, and suddenly it learns something quite complicated. And we're the same. So I have no doubt actually we can, if you take a child and you program it the right way, you show it the right things in the right order, you can get a child to think what you want. You literally can. I realised how dangerous education was done incorrectly when you come to realise that we're just a neural network, right? We have some unique properties. So I don't think the neural network's inherently going to be good or evil. I think that we inherently have a layer below that that's come from keeping us alive in the past, that we just can't flick off so quickly because of evolution's not that quick, and technology is. So it's not at all obvious to me that a super intelligence that has none of that pre-existing problem that we have will come to that conclusion at all. In fact, it makes no sense to me it would. Why? What's it? You think about it, why do you want to do the bad stuff? It's like, it doesn't need to. It's super intelligent. It's like it can do what it wants, right? So back to your point, unless you program it deliberately, just like with kids, you could, and we're the same. Like, I think you can take a child, and if you, train its neural network through the way you interact with them over the years, you can create quite different children, right? I heard a podcast from Lex Friedman we talked about before, and it was Yomi from North Korea, and listening to her talk about how when they grow up as kids, they have no concept of love of parents, just as love of leader. It was really eye-opening that kind of you could think like that, but you can't once you've trained a neural network. Having done that now, it's like, of course you can. It's like you can train a neural network to do what you want. Now, there are some things that we will override, but actually if you're really good at it and you control everything, how could we not learn whatever someone wants to program us with.
Terrifying.
Terrifying. But as I said, I don't think intelligence cares about that at all. I don't think it wants to. It doesn't need to. I think all those worries we have, apart from if it's, as you say, if it's not truth-seeking, I think all those worries are human worries, and they're all real. I mean, they're things that we have, and they kind of make us who we are. I just don't. It doesn't make sense to me that if you're super intelligent, that you think like that. Why would you? You got no need to. You're not threatened. You don't have to worry about anything. You can do what you want. You're very smart. It's just like, I think we're just putting our human condition on super intelligence and expecting it to have that underlying prehistoric part to our brains. It's no longer probably functioning as we would probably want it to.
Kim, I recommend the 8-hour podcast if you have some spare time between running a business and raising kids. It's quite fascinating.
It's a long time. It's a long time. It's completely off topic at the moment, but talking about 8-hour podcast, I think, talking to Shane and what he's learned and going and studying neural networks for 18 months, and I think maybe I said it to you in the car, we were driving someone the other day back from somewhere, and for me, learning styles and access to information, everyone's got a different style. So for me, it's kind of interesting. For me, I feel like everyone says, hacking a product to succeed. I feel like my knowledge now is all hacked. It's like, okay, I don't need to listen to the 8-hour podcast because Shane and Chris have, and I trust you and I trust your knowledge. Give me, the old school uni cliff notes, right? Let's have coffee and you tell me what I need to know, right? Or I'm interested in, workplace psychology, and I listen to Adam Grant for 30 minutes talk about something, and then I'll go and watch a TED talk. And I think within 2 hours, for me, hopefully based on those resources, I've learned what I need to learn. And if I want to go deeper, I can go deeper. And that's maybe also the beauty of AI and ChatGPT. People are saying, make this simplified for me, right? So I think there's those elements around AI that are also how do we make it easier versus, you turning it into this super intelligence, right? Because I think if you feed, I think, Shane, what you're saying is, inherently, super intelligence shouldn't be evil and it won't be bad. Why not, right? But if it's trained on what's happened historically, does it still say, well, okay, there was a war here and everyone recovered, there was something here and everyone recovered, so it wasn't really a bad thing, right? Or Japan lost the war, but then they turned into an economic superpower as a result because, well, we can't beat you in war, but we can beat you in making cars, or we can beat you in your economy, right? So then, if you just look at it at ones and zeros, then does that, when you look at it that way, does it mean, well, actually it was a good result for them because they therefore did better as a result?
Well, I think here's the key, actually. I mean, what you raise is really good because this is the key to why I don't think it'll be bad. Remember, it doesn't have any baggage, right? It doesn't have our brain. It's got no baggage. If you remember, it's going to understand everything. So it's looked through all the history of humankind and everything else. It's going to understand us better than we understand ourselves. So it's going to, remember, it's smart. It's going to look at all that stuff, and it's not got any triggers in its brain to kind of like fight or flight or anything like that. So it's going to look at it and go, gosh, I can see why humans did all this stuff, right? It'll understand everything. So it'll know that we grew from nothing. We went through the stage where it was like we killed each other all the time just over, tribes and to have babies and breed and all that stuff. And then we, however, transitioned to Homo sapiens, and then we did all this other stuff. And then even like 100 years ago, we were putting each other into, slavery or killing each other. So we've got this history, right? But it will understand. The point is, it will understand us. It will know us better than we know ourselves. So it won't judge us from the fact that you kill people. It will understand why we did it. It will understand. Do you know what I mean? It will deeply understand everything about how we got here, who we are, why we what we are. It'll understand how we loved, right? It'll understand how we did everything. And I think that's what's so powerful when you think of it as a super intelligence without baggage.
So, but I mean, break it back simply for me. So basically, I think if you load it with all this information but don't qualify it as good or bad and all that stuff, it will work it out for itself, right? Where, potentially it's like this war happened and it was bad, right? And you give it this knowledge to say that was actually the wrong thing to do, where you just say, here's the history, here's all the knowledge encyclopedias, you work it out for yourself, and it will be smart enough to make those its own determinations rather than, everyone says it's just a large
That's what
language model,
intelligence is, right? That's what intelligence is.
So, but AI today is just a language model fed by information that you put into it, right? And it's not it's not self-aware, right?
It's a party trick at the moment, right? It's a very impressive party trick, and I'm not downplaying it. It's amazing what it does, and we stumbled on it because we copied the brain and fed a lot of information, and we get some stuff that's just remarkable, and it's because of our brain. It's because of the way we understand our brain works that a simple digital implementation has turned out to be more powerful probably than our biological brains, given the number of neurons it has.
Yeah, so is the important factor, though, based on that, as well as like people come back and you say, okay, well, if it was trained by 70% of men, put in the information to train it, and they were predominantly white, of this class, then we need to be aware that there's some bias in those responses, right? Like,
I think it'll get to the point where it knows there are biases. You don't have to tell it. That's the point. Once we get to, we're not there yet. I don't know how many orders of magnitude we are away from that. But when we truly get there, the point is it'll get all that stuff. As long as we feed it all information, and it'll even know that we've lied about stuff. It'll probably know that the Bible was probably messed with. It's very unlikely.
Whoa, what?
Well, it's very unlikely that any document that's passed through history, someone hasn't messed with it for political gain or whatever they want, right? It's not impossible. It's just highly unlikely for all these documents, right? So it'll know all that stuff. Remember, it's intelligent. I'll tell you the other thing that kind of gives me hope, and this is the bit I always struggle with, and this is a point where I disagree with Elon Musk as well, by the way. So he's kind of like, he goes, I hope the aliens are nice and they don't come here to kill us. It's like, in my mind, it's impossible that as a race we get to technological advancement such that we can travel through time and space at any great distance and we're still killing each other or wanting to blow each other up, because the technology will be so advanced that we would literally not exist. We will literally destroy ourselves. And that is the risk, by the way, we're about to face as humankind, is can we handle the technology through this delicate period where we probably would likely have 2 or 3 more generations of hopefully people to grow up in a different world slowly, but we don't have that. And in that case, we would, we'd be less likely to destroy ourselves. We could destroy ourselves quite easily, right? But any advanced alien race that can cloak itself, get here, travel across time, firstly, being undetected, no problem. I mean, they can travel through space, they can do whatever they want. Secondly, it's like if you're a killer in that world, you could build all sorts of technology to destroy the biological weapons, whatever you want. Like you can control probably gravity. It's like you can't evolve to that level as a race and not deal with the issue about you're not killers. It's crazy to think you can travel through space and time. You want to come here because you want our water? It's like, you can have whatever you want. It's like, I don't get anyone that thinks any intelligence race, basically that got to this part of the world, would come here because they want to destroy the earth and take us over. It's like, it's seriously human thinking that is completely, from my mind, not even considering the realities of if you got to that advancement as a race, you just can't think like that. If you did, you destroy yourself.
Yeah, but that's the problem with human thinking as well, right? So we're saying that at a certain level of intelligence, you're not going to be worried about that, right? Like we all get into this thing saying the race is going to come here because their world's blown up and they need our resources, so therefore they're going to kill us because they don't want to coexist, right? So that's kind of like this thing that we all get from whether it's pop culture or watching movies and all those kind of things. But who's to say it would not happen? And I think, but just coming back to us, assuming that there's no aliens, right? Like, but just being humans. We are broken in many respects, right? Like a lot of people say...
We're a work in progress.
Yeah, but so the super intelligence might be there, but then are we happy then? Maybe there's a need for the super intelligence to protect us from ourselves, because we'll never evolve to that level to say that we're never going to harm someone, right? Like people say that there's a reason why that there's a thief in this world, or there's a murderer, or there's something. And some people say we always need that because that's what will drive us as a whole to do better, right? And if it wasn't there, there's no drive to change, right? So it's a weird thing, right, saying we always need someone that's going to kill someone because that teaches us to do something different, right? And then from the AI perspective, and we're not going, they're saying, Terminators aren't going to kill everyone because that's what they've learned, right? But then if their awareness is Shane's bad, Shane's going to do something bad, should I let Shane exist? Right, because...
Well, that's human thinking, right? No, they don't have human thinking. This is the point. If we apply our own thought processes to them, we do it wrong. We're not there. The bigger question is, this is a bit I struggle with, is how to, without going through generations, how do we change as society and as people to become the best of ourselves, right? I mean, we're about to be gifted the most incredible technologies of all time. Mm-hmm. We are all sitting on the cusp of an amazing moment in history, which I find hard to believe is coincidental, because, the randomness of you just happen to be around this moment is pretty small. And yet, whatever happens in the next 10, 20, 30 years is going to be, we're in the front seat of something quite remarkable that could go any way possible.
Mm-hmm. It's really cool, isn't it?
It's great to be here. I mean, it's a bit scary.
I read this, as you know, well, you may or may not know, I'm quite into sci-fi. And I read a book about the prime directive of an AGI being to protect the species. And so the AGI decided it needed to send them back to the Stone Age because it's the only way that the species could propagate, because they were too ingenious and would always invent new ways of killing each other, which I really love. So you made me think about that, about, protect us at all costs. Well, what would a benevolent God, because that's what you're talking about, give or take, AGI God, all controlling, all knowing, omnipotent, omnipresent, etc. What would it choose? And then I read another book which was about, give or take, let's call it an arms race. And, the people that emerged from the planet to be interplanetary weren't the same people. The conflict took them off and, became interplanetary population essential. I mean, who the hell knows? But I love the intersection. I love the possibilities of it. I love the possibilities that we're not far from. I mean, the Neuralink, the first 3 hours with Elon, then the CEO, that young man who it just blew my mind with the possibilities. And when I think about sci-fi books that I look at still or watch, I'm watching The Expanse at the moment. And the human interface to the space control systems. And as I was listening to the Neuralink, I was listening to about BCI, brain control interfaces, brain computer interfaces, BCIs. I'm like, of course, why would you, if you're interplanetary, have a joystick, which means you're having to, try and move through G-force? Of course you'd have a BCI. And man, the first 3 hours, I was just like, it just, so much in science fiction just tweaked into place. And I found it, whether people like Musk or not, or the Neuralink concept, man, there's something in it, especially coupled with the possibility to have access to all knowledge and all memory in one's brain, which is basically what we're talking about with the implant. We could get there through Bluetooth communication, have everything. Terrifying.
Yeah, I think what's remarkable, having spent time with neural networks, is just how simple they are in some ways. I mean, they do remarkable things. But we stumbled on them a little bit just by copying what we knew about our brains, and, compute got better and we worked new techniques out. But it's remarkable. It's literally remarkable that so simple a thing can do such amazing computations. And, so we live in the most interesting times. I just hope we, as society, we move into a world of, abundance thinking. When we've come from this, none of us are well trained for this possibility, right? I mean, I look at what Elon's doing, for example, with the spaceship. The idea that we'll be able to put, people on Mars very soon and build colonies there. The idea that we're going to have truly have spaceports in space where we can actually do manufacturing and tourism and all sorts of other stuff. I mean, we're truly not that far away from building the Starship Enterprise and being able to travel through. We got to crack a few things around speed, but that's I'm sure that's doable. I'm sure we'll work out how to fold space on itself or something. But, we live in this incredible time. Like, literally all the stuff we all grew up as kids dreaming about, is at our fingertips. But we're just as a race, we're just not ready for it. Well, like, not that we're not ready for it. We're just not built the right way yet, and we haven't trained our kids to be ready for it either.
It's probably why we have to augment ourselves into Homo Deus. That's why it'll have to happen. I think who did I listen to recently about that? There is no way with any technology that we have now or can invent that will travel through space. The only hope was to discover how we would fold space and travel through gaps, give or take.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be hard. I mean, when I say it's not hard, of course it is. But I mean, if we get super intelligence, there'll be these angles we just haven't looked at, right? And we'll have the ability to do that stuff quite easily. I'm completely unconvinced that we can't do most of the things we think are impossible. And that's, human history has shown that the whole time, right? Everything we do now is like 20, 30 years ago seemed impossible. It's just, we just build.
But I think what you're saying is, it's all going to happen, but we're not ready for it now, right? And we weren't ready for things during the Industrial Revolution and early technology and now. And it's a great time to be alive because things are going to go as fast as they can go. But as well as we can teach kids, I mean, we're around 50? We could live to 150. We're going to struggle to even, like in my view, even just teach ourselves how to keep up, right? Because we think they're there, we're there, and we get it. In 5 years' time, we're going to be going, I knew nothing, right? Yep. I was not prepared for this. So we need to prepare our kids. But then I also think the challenge is, for most of us, we may not be able to prepare ourselves. So the guardrails we've got guardrails because we think we know about them, but they might be false.
I'll build on that. I reckon if you said to me, what was the one thing I could change that we don't have at the moment in society, and that's leaders that can take us through, basically this incredible change, right? Especially where it could potentially interrupt work. And we have no leader. Like, the political system's completely broken, right? It's not get up for the sort of leadership we need. We need people that would never go into politics to step up and lead societies through an incredible change. And it's just a different. The problem is, I talk about our brains having so much programming from prehistoric times where it was kind of so necessary to keep us alive. Our political system is just as bad. We've got this incredible system, just doesn't work, doesn't serve the people. It's completely systemically corrupt. So it's not that the people are corrupt. The systemic corruption is in the way everything's sort of been wired over time as people find ways of manipulating stuff. We need to fix it. The problem is, if we can't fix the education system, which we can't quick enough to get our kids skilled up differently, we certainly need a completely different set of leaders in the political sphere that are different than anything we've seen yet. I mean, there's not a single leader in the world that I even remotely would look up to. I mean, I wouldn't even hire them if I had to. They're just, it's not that they're terrible people. They're politicians. They're completely geared up the wrong way. They're completely from a point of scarcity. They've greased so many wheels to usually get where they have. They owe so many favours. Joe Public doesn't get anything out of them, right? So we need completely different leaders, right? They've got no vested interest in all the stuff. They truly care about society. You can't put them under a microscope. That's the other thing. Like, the newspapers have a lot to answer for. And basically, they don't like you, they destroy you. And they can do so much. I mean, anyone that doesn't know that, just watch US politics. It's incredible coverage. And I have to laugh because I've got no skin in the game. I love it. If there's ever an article on Robert Kennedy, I know nothing about the guy. It's about how a worm's eaten his brain or he's dropped a beer in, New York Park or something, in Central Park. And just the fact that's the only coverage they get. And Elon Musk, right, because they hate him because he's competing with them, right? I always go looking after a Starlink launch, and it's never like he's just put the biggest spaceship in space ever. It's always, it crashed after takeoff and no one was killed. It's like, it's a test flight. No one's going to be on the board, right? And same about Tesla. If there's ever an angle you can find, it's all they write about. So we can't have that in our society. And I don't blame the papers, by the way. I mean, they've got to make money, and they trigger people. But we have to fix that. We have to fix the politicians. If Biden and now it's Kamala, but if it was Biden and Harris were the best the US can come up with for leaders, you clearly know it's broken, right? And Australia is better because we're smaller, so we have the potential. It's easier to change here. It's still not easy, but it's easier. And we need to fix that. We need completely different leaders than what we have today.
It's hard to change. I think, everyone will say the best politicians don't want to become politicians, right? And, I think that's going to take a lot longer to change than the legal system, right? The legal system traditionally has been, 20 years behind the times, and it kind of gets accelerated now and maybe progresses a little bit faster, but politics is going to be harder, and that's the view around. I think for me, the US versus Australian politics is also, the benefits of having compulsory voting versus non-compulsory voting, right? So in the US, it's not compulsory. 20 years ago, if you had the Jewish community and the farmers on your side, you'd win the election, right? With 20% of the popular vote, versus in Australia, everyone has to vote and people turn up. But then for me, the reflection on that is just because it's compulsory to vote doesn't mean you're going to vote well, right? So there's that as an issue as well. In Australia, if you go around finances, right, to be the Prime Minister of Australia, you get paid $500,000 a year, right? And everyone goes, yeah, they get this golden pension and they get a secretary for life and so on and so forth, right? But potentially the best person that could be leading Australia would be earning $5 million a year, not $500,000 a year. And you'd say, well, they're just greedy for the money. That may be true, right? But then the person that would be willing to do it for free, it feels like it's too much of they're going to get skinned alive by doing that. So then there's no incentive for them, right? So is it what changes the political system? Is it the leaders that run it, or is it actually the people putting their hands up going, we don't want this system anymore, we need to make a change? And the people themselves, I think 100 years from now, they'll be complaining that it's broken, but there'll still be no way that they can collectively change it, or we can collectively change it.
I mean, this is a fundamental problem, right? I mean, how do we create change, substantial change, quickly? And the answer is we probably can't. We're just not capable. And, with politics, it's so many systems that get up to keep the status quo. I mean, the biggest eye-opener for me was a number of years back. I went to, when I was in Wellington, I went to a few of the parliament sittings which you can go into publicly, because my brothers had come from Wellington. They wanted to go and sit on one. And it was honestly the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen in my life. It was like school children. Here are our leaders of the country behaving like school children. And I also worked for a number of government agencies, and so, I was involved sometimes around the question time questions. And this wasn't about seeking truth. This was gamesmanship. It was asking hard questions to hopefully cause political damage. So the questions weren't taken seriously. They weren't asked seriously. I mean, they'd say they were, but they weren't. And so, we just need, the problem is in society, without some sort of civil, and I'm not suggesting a civil war, but I just don't know what's going to create the magnitude of change that we honestly need in order to really shake things up. So we just need to come up with some way where we can do radical change, and for humanity's sake, not for political reasons or anything else. And I don't know, and maybe AI will come into play with this. And you asked me a question about what is the greatest thing AI might do. It might surprise you. I mean, the only thing I can think of is it helps us change society quickly. I don't see anything else as being radical, and not that it won't be impressive, but it's stuff you already know about, whether it's medicines and material science and breakthrough and primary physics breakthrough. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's like all that stuff's kind of, we expect that to come along. But maybe the one thing it can do, if we got really lucky, is it can help mankind, humanity, shift quickly, into a world of abundance, so that we stop these, really bad habits we have.
And I agree with that too, right? And I think AI can learn and do those things, and if you put, these like AI in charge of a country, they could do it better than almost anyone, right? But then on the flip side, as humans, we're like, we really want that because it will know better than us and it can do better than us. But then at the same time, we'll be like, who are you to tell me what you are? You're a machine. You're not. I am me, right? And that's always going to be a problem, right? I don't think any machine's ever going to solve that, or AI or data, or.
And I don't think it would work like that. The question is how. I don't know how it would work, but it's not. I don't think as humans we'd accept it quite like that. So, but I don't also think we can predict if it is super intelligence we're talking about. And just as an aside, I'm not. I haven't seen anything that suggests we're on the path to super intelligence. I think we have amazing intelligence. It's going to transform every part of industry. So even if everything we know about the next generations of stuff froze, it is transformational, bigger than anything we've ever seen. But there's a huge gap between that and super intelligence. And I have seen nothing that suggests we're as close to that as we think we are. But it also doesn't mean to say we're not. It just may not be shown yet, because when I look at everything I've seen around the AI models to date, from what I first saw, absolutely they're way, way better. They're way more improved, no question. But they're not more intelligent, not from what I've seen. And also, I think they'll get more intelligent with order of magnitude changes of the data, so that's coming. But more accurate understanding what we know, it's still for me a party trick a little bit. It's not that it's not really super amazing, but it's not. There's another level that we are far, far away from it. And I do wonder that we're going to discover that, quantum in our brains and in cells, what we barely understand yet, that AI might help us understand better. But I do think that we're going to find probably a level of complexity in that when we come to understand it, that AI is not going to do for a while. So I don't. I'm more on the Ray Kurzweil things, which we'll see AGI by 2030, 2029. And in fact, I think you could argue we've got AGI now in specialised areas. And I think I agree with him that it'll be 2045 before we see super intelligence, or what he calls the singularity. And I think that's true, because I think we need a period of time, which he's predicting to be 15 years. And it's not that we won't get amazing stuff. We're going through incredible times. But I think it's the fact that we are going to find out that there's probably quantum entanglement plays with cells and brains that, it's going to take us a lot longer to break through that. I think what we're going to see with the order of magnitude improvements is they're going to be way, way, way more precise at capturing the innate intelligence in the written word. So I think, and in the visuals and everything else, right, and the modalities. So I think if you show it everything and it's really, really good, it finds innate intelligence, because it compresses it into the point where that's what it is. So I'm comfortable we're on that pathway. It's transformational. I'm not comfortable with the super intelligence. And I do some stuff with it where I keep testing every now and then with stuff I know it doesn't know, and it doesn't have that level of intelligence yet.
I'm conscious, gentlemen, we've been here for nearly 2 hours. I know, right? It goes well, doesn't it? I had another thought today. AI is the renaissance of language, because of the necessity for using specific words for prompt engineering. It means we're going to have to revisit that when a machine understands the complexity of all language. And I really like that concept. I really like that we might rediscover the importance of words and meaning, even if it is in service of extracting information out of a machine. Look, this isn't our last one. Let's revisit some of these themes. We have covered technology, delivery, children, and how perfect all of the people are that in our lives that we influence. We've talked about accidental complexity. We've talked about innovation being elusive, about finding people. We talked about the advent of AI. We talked about, philosophy around AI, about feeding one's own psyche. I mean, there's so many notes I have from this I'll have to synthesize, but I appreciate both your time. Is there anything else you'd like to cover that cannot be left said until the next time we get together, when we'll do another 1 hour podcast over 3 hours?
No, I don't think there's anything. I think the best thing that we should do, given AI and ChatGPT, is always just take our phone and put the microphone on and record it, and we'll make a podcast every time we speak.
I like it. I feel like I'm doing that anyway, but in a very analog way with my little books here, the things that I draw. All right, Kim, thank you very much for your time. Shane, thank you for your time.
Great talking.
Thank you.
Thank you.